Hello class, this is your professor Rachel Walker with the last part of chapter 27, Republican Resurgence and Decline. This time we're dealing with the last parts of the Great Depression. Now Hoover's program for ending the Depression called for the federal government to lend funds to banks and corporations on the verge of collapse. However, they were limited in how they should be implemented. And once again, Hoover tried to restore public confidence. He believed that was his goal, his main goal. However, the plans were failing to check the slide. For example, Hoover placed too much reliance on the powers of persuasion and willingness of the citizens themselves, such as the bank owners and such, to act in the public interest without legal compulsion or force. And manufacturers ended up slashing wages and curtailed output sharply. And one of Hoover's most serious failings during the Depression was his refusal to allow federal funds to be used for direct relief for individuals. He refused to shift responsibility from the state and local agencies to the federal government. The Depression, as it continued, dried up funds from private charities. And then when the drought destroyed crops in the South and Southwest in the 1930s, this is the beginnings of, well, it's not really the beginnings of the Dust Bowl, but you start seeing major environmental changes. Government lent them money but refused direct relief, i.e. refused to just give them money. Okay. One of the things that was done was the Glass-Steagall Banking Act of 1932. It eased the tight credit situation that was going on by permitting Federal Reserve banks to accept a wider variety of commercial paper as security for loans. But as late as 1939, 60% of the people and 57.5% of the unemployed believed in a balanced budget was more important. Okay. But by 1930s, you have the Hawley-Smoot tariff. This has been basically the thing that causes the Great Depression to go international as opposed to being a solely domestic issue. What it did was raise duties on most manufactured goods to prohibitive levels. It made it impossible for European nations who were already broke trying to make money. They needed to continue making loan payments. So basically, it fostered a European collapse in 1931. Hoover put the one-year moratorium on foreign debts. In other words, he allowed them to stop paying for 1 year, but he did blame Europeans for the depression when they devalued their currencies. And remember, Germany did the same thing in attempts to actually avoid paying their debts. The main thing to learn out of this frame, apart from all this that's in green, is that Hoover's response to the Great Depression was inadequate because it was too rigid and uncompromising. And this is what's going to make him significantly different from the next president. By 1932, the economy hits bottom. Only 1/4 of the unemployed in the country were receiving public aid. You see the economy hit rock bottom and thousands face starvation. People who had been evicted gathered in ramshackle communities constructed of packing boxes and other discarded items, and they called them Hoovervilles as a condemnation of the ineffectuality of Hoover's economic solutions. You see the beginnings of thousands of tramps roaming the countryside. You see farmers burning their corn for fuel while others protested. You also see what is known as the Mexican repatriation. In 1931, you see federal officials in the Southwest began deporting Mexican Americans for fear that they might become dependent on public funds. You also see the bonus army, okay, around June and July 1932, where you had 20,000 unemployed World War I veterans march on Washington to demand immediate payment of their adjusted compensation bonuses. The president charged that the bonus army was composed of radicals and criminals, and he sent troops to disperse them with bayonets, tear gas, and tanks. Okay, which did not look good. In fact, you see the Communist Party began to gain more converts, particularly amongst intellectuals alienated by the trends of the 1920s. Okay. This one may be a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but I'm just finishing up here. As far as the Depression and its victims, if you notice this picture, it's really become the universal symbol of the Great Depression in America. At first, people who lost their jobs did search for a new one, but once the unemployment continued for more than a few months, they sank into apathy. You see the birth rate drop. You see influences of wives and families struck by unemployment tend to increase. That was part of your quiz that we did in class. You also see the rise of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay, Democrats chose him. He was governor of New York. New York had led the nation in providing the relief for the needy. He had enacted old age pensions, unemployment insurance, and conservation and public power projects. Maybe it won't go beyond 5 minutes. FDR's political ideas actually were consistent with that of Coolidge prosperity. Okay? While he was hard to pin down on many issues, it was clear there needed to be a New Deal and he'd provide that. Roosevelt campaigned actively and soaked up information from many sources. And Hoover actually won 6 states in the election, but FDR triumphed easily with 22.8 million votes and electoral victory of 472 electoral votes to 59. Well, that's it finally for chapter 27. The next chapter I'll probably do is 29 because as of Tuesday we'll probably do chapter 30.